Good morning. Welcome to the midweek edition of your leadership program on leadership television, that is Inside Nigeria. Today's show, we are looking at what the papers are saying, including Nigeria's most influential leadership newspaper. And of course, we have other papers as well on our lineup. First, we target leadership newspaper. Leadership leading story this Wednesday, September 10, 2025, says CBN targets $1 billion monthly diaspora remittances next year, as Tinubu orders clamp down on unregulated digital currencies. Leading story on leadership newspaper. And of course, I'm your host on the program, Winifred Webo. We move ahead to look at more cover stories. You can't resume now, Senators Natasha. The story is on page 18 of Leadership newspaper. You can't resume now. And that same story is also gracing the cover, the main cover story in another paper we have on our lineup, and that is Nigerian Tribune. Reps give minister 48 hours to appear over train derailment. The story also continues on page 18 of Leadership. No tax ID, no contracts, new act stipulates. Of course, you are aware that the new tax reform will officially start up next year, 2026, January. No tax ID, no contracts, new act stipulates. You can get that story on page 23 of Leadership. There is no immediate plan to implement 5% fuel tax, coming from the Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy. There's no immediate plan to implement 5% fuel tax, Wale Edu. Patients groan as doctors strike cripple services at Abuja hospitals. Patients groan as doctors strike cripple services at Abuja hospitals. The story is on page 4 of Leadership. Of course, we have the pictures of people displayed by floods in Jane Ward, Kari, Lamido local government area and Kunini community in Lao local government area of Taraba State, being provided with relief materials by officials of Taraba State Emergency Management Agency, SEMA, yesterday. These are the pictures gracing the cover of Leadership. And above that, we have 2027, more governors will join APC, says the APC new national chairman, Yuwateda. 2027, more governors will join APC. That story is on page 22 of Leadership. Going towards the masthead of Leadership, oil workers suspend strike after resolving dispute with Dangote Group. And of course, the story has it that the part of the crisis, the conditions which was that the Dangote workers were free to join the union. The story is on page 4 of Leadership. Of course, it's been a developing story since on Monday when the news broke that Nopeng was threatening strike over the fact that Dangote workers were not allowed to join the union, with federal government wading into the issue. But let's look at some excerpts of that story. We move over to page 4. It says, the Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers, Nopeng, yes, suspended its nationwide strike yesterday after reaching an agreement with Dangote Refinery and Petrochemicals Management. The agreement comes after days of strike action by Nopeng, which accused the Dangote Group of denying employees the right to join recognized labor unions. The dispute escalated into a standoff, prompting a reconciliation intervention by the federal government through the Ministry of Labor and Employment that ended in a deadlock on Monday night. At a conciliation meeting by the minister, Mohammed Megeri Dingida, both parties had lengthy discussions that produced a memorandum of understanding, MOU, signed in Abuja. According to the resolutions, Dangote Refinery and Petrochemicals formally agreed to allow willing employees to join registered unions. The unionization process will begin immediately and is expected to be concluded within 2 weeks between September 9 and September 22, 2025. The agreement also prohibits the creation of a parallel union within the Dangote Group's refinery or petrochemicals arm. Both sides agreed that no worker would be victimized for participating in or supporting the strike. Excerpts from that developing story we started on Monday, and yesterday night, the impasse was finally reached. with oil workers suspending their strike after resolving the dispute with Dangote Group. We'll continue from where we stop on the cover of Leadership newspaper. On the business bus, we have NCAA summons local airlines over flight cancellations delays. NCAA summons local airlines over flight cancellations delays. Business story on the business bus of Leadership. The Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, NCAA, has summoned domestic airline operators to an emergency meeting over the growing number of unresolved refund compensation complaints, the enforcement of safety measures like the phone switch-off directive, flight delays, and cancellations. Leadership reports that the local airlines are Air Peace, Ibom Air, United Nigeria, Green Africa, Mars Air, Arik Air, Aero Contractor, ValueJet, and Overland. Speaking on Tuesday on his X handle, the NCAA Director of Public Affairs and Consumer Protection, Michael Achimogu, said the meeting is scheduled for Wednesday at the NCAA headquarters in Lagos. Business story on the business bus of Leadership cover this Wednesday. NCAA summons local airlines over flight cancellations delays. From there, we move to the story above the masthead of Leadership. Boat accidents. NIWA bans unlicensed operators. Illegal loading points on waterways. 8 died in suspected Buruli Osab outbreak at Adamawa government. Of course, it was reported that many Adamawa indigenes were having strange ailments, strange diseases on their skin, which breaks out in sores. And the governor has come out to say that 8 has died from that suspected Buruli Oxa outbreak, which has been confirmed. From that cover, we move to the page 3 of the paper today, where we have our stand. Like I always mentioned, our stand is the editorial stand of the paper. That is the view, the collective view of the paper for the day. And today's stand is on Arase, top cop goes home. Arase, top cop goes home. May the soul of the former IGP rest in peace. From the page 3 today, we move to the back page of Leadership, where we have Wednesday column with Olufunke Barua. Today she's writing on the death or the art of foreign policy. Quote from the column says, the global landscape currently feels like a chaotic scene where the lines between diplomacy and brute interest are blurred. Quote from the death or the art of foreign policy. Wednesday column with Olufunke Barua. We also must visit Ghana Must Go. On the news, El-Rufai petitions Police Service Commission over Kaduna incident. And then the Ghana Must Go ask him, the security wing of the APC is a question for Malam Nasir El-Rufai. On that note, we conclude review of front headline stories on Leadership this Wednesday. For more, don't forget to log into the website of Leadership newspaper. From Leadership, we move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is The Punch. The Punch is on the doctors threatening strike action. It says doctors to decide on nationwide strike today. NANSNEC meets to review government's response to demands. NAMED decries $1 billion yearly spending on medical tourism. Tinubu restates commitment to health sector transformation. Vows to end hospitals' power crisis with hybrid solutions. Kickers to the leading story on today's The Punch newspaper. Doctors to decide on nationwide strike today as NAD meets to review government's response to demands. Still on the Punch newspaper, we have PDP sans protest as Senate blocks Natasha's return. PDP sans, that is Senior Advocates of Nigeria, protest as Senate blocks Natasha's return. 5 soldiers terrorists feared killed in Zamfara clash. Osun Kingmakers reject move to dethrone Jade Monarch. Osun Kingmakers reject move to dethrone Jade Monarch. Vehicle theft. 3 Nigerians jailed 96 years in Ghana. South Africa dents Eagles World Cup hopes after stalemates. Of course, Nigeria drew a a 1-1 draw with South Africa. That is Bafana Boys of South Africa yesterday evening. South Africa dents Eagles World Cup hopes after stalemate. That takes us to the story beside the masthead of the Punch. No immediate plan to implement fuel surcharge, federal government says. No paying suspense strike as Dangote accepts unions' demands. 31 states domestic debt hits 2.57 trillion naira. 31 states domestic debt hits 2.57 trillion naira. Excuse me. 2027 presidency, Jonathan split South PDP. The story is on page 2 of the Punch. 2027 presidency, Jonathan split South PDP. And that draws to a close the review of front headline stories on the Punch newspaper this Wednesday. For more, log into the website of the Punch newspaper. We head up to the next paper on our lineup, and that is Daily Sun. Daily Sun's leading story says Northern elders recommend dialogue with bandits. And a few days ago, they asked the federal government to declare state of emergency on insecurity in the north. Today's report, Northern elders recommend dialogue with bandits. Tell governors negotiation, not weakness. Treat informants like bandits, Governor Aliyu. Talks can solve 70% of insecurity in North Central, coming from presidency. Leading story on today's Daily Sun newspaper, Northern elders recommend dialogue with bandits. Atop that leading story, still on the cover of Daily Sun, Presidency Obi, Labour Party clash over rising loans, debts. Federal government not over borrowing, coming from Dari. Beside the masthead of Daily Sun, strike, Dangote refinery, no paying, Pegasan settle rift. Staff of Dangote free to join unions. It's on that note we conclude review of front headline stories on Daily Sun newspaper. For more, log into www.thesun.ng. From the Sun, we move over to the next paper on our lineup, and that is Vanguard. Vanguard says world leaders' envoys condemn Israel's attacks on Qatar. World leaders' envoys condemn Israel's attacks on Qatar. Attack, reaction to Monday's Jerusalem shooting, Netanyahu. UK Prime Minister distances herself from attack. Experts experts call for de-escalation of crisis. Poplio says it's a serious situation. These are riders to the leading story on Vanguard. World leaders' envoys condemn Israel's attacks on Qatar. New curriculum, don't implement in hurry, experts tell federal government. Of course, federal government has come out with a new curriculum for basic education and senior secondary school. And experts in reaction to that says don't implement in hurry. The story is on page 10 of Vanguard. Ahead 2027, more governors, senators, reps eager to join APC, says Diwatida, the new National APC chairman. More governors, senators, reps eager to join APC. No paying suspense strike after DSS broker truce with Dangote. Expiration of suspension. PDP kicks as Senate denies Natasha resumption. And now sports. Eagles draw against Bafana, sad for Nigerian football. Akpeyi. Eagles draw against Bafana, sad for Nigerian football. Akpeyi. This is still on the cover of the Vanguard newspaper. We move ahead atop the masthead of Vanguard. Federal government Gazette tax reform laws implementation begins January 2026. Just what I announced earlier. The new tax reform law will come into effect January 2026. The story runs on page 19 of Vanguard. How kidnapped major was rescued in Delta community. Gridlock as flash floods take over Lagos roads, paralyze businesses. will brand Nigeria's global culinary powerhouse coming from Kale Jai. And that also concludes review of front headline stories on Vanguard this Wednesday. For more, log into the website of Vanguard newspaper. We move ahead to the next paper on our Wednesday, and that is Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune is on the talk on Natasha and the Senate. It says suspension. Senate Natasha in fresh drama. You can't resume now, Nastes Kogi Senator. Sides pending appeal court case. PDP kicks Senate overreaching itself, coming from Adegboruwa. Instinctively or instructively, Adegboruwa is the lawyer or legal representative to the Senate president. However, in this matter, it says the Senate is overreaching itself. Suspension, Senate Natasha in fresh drama. You can't resume now, Nastes Kogi Senator. Sides pending appeal court case. PDP kicks Senate overreaching itself at Degburuwa. Kickers to that leading story. Still on Nigerian Tribune, we won't tolerate power supply crisis in tertiary hospitals. Tinubu. 40% functional PHCs in Nigeria lack access to electricity, reports underneath that story, and it runs on page 4 of Nigerian Tribune. 40% functional PHCs, that is primary health care centers in Nigeria, lack access to electricity. FROS, AEFCC strengthen alliance to enforce voluntary tax compliance. Instinctively, all the papers we have on our lineup today have a story 1 or 2 on this new tax reform, which is taking effect next year. It says FROS, which is going to morph into NROC next year's. EFCC strengthen alliance to enforce voluntary tax compliance. Experts blame low CNG penetration on high infrastructure cost, insufficient stations, others. And in health, heart attacks may be triggered by infections. Study. That story is on page 13 of Nigerian Tribune. Instructively, Nigerian Tribune has a health story on its cover every day. Heart attacks may be triggered by infections. New study carried out, and that story is on page 13 of Nigerian Tribune. Northern elders urge governors to renegotiate with bandits. That story is on page 3 of Nigerian Tribune. Northern elders urge governors to negotiate with bandits. Wale Edun says no plan for immediate implementation of 5% fuel tax. And we move atop the masthead of Nigerian Tribune. Dangote Nupeng reach agreement, strike called off, how DSS intervene. And that also concludes the review of front headline stories on Nigerian Tribune this Wednesday. For more, log into the website of Nigerian Tribune. We move to the next paper on our lineup, and that is the Daily Times. Daily Times leading story says economy reforms wounds temporary, recovery permanent, coming from Shettima. We also have the picture of Shettima being decorated yesterday as a fellow of the Nigerian Economic Society by the president of the society, Professor Adiola Adenikinjugu, and former Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Dr. Shamsuddin Usman, left during the 66th annual conference of the Nigerian Economic Society in Abuja yesterday. Beneath that bold picture, NCAA summons airlines over passengers' recurrent complaints. UK government announces £19 million funding for climate resilience health development in Nigeria. CBN moves collaboration with Finance, Trade Ministries, Budget Office. Rep summon Transport Minister over train derailment. And lastly, on the cover of the Daily Times, Nupeng suspends strike reaches agreement with Dangote Refinery. Atop the masthead of the Daily Times, multiple taxation killing hotel business in Nigeria Association. Ignore NAS, get ready to resume plenary. PDP charges Senator Akpoti Uduaghan. That story is on page 14 of the Daily Times. It says, Ignore NAS, get ready to resume plenary. PDP charges Senator Akpoti Uduaghan. And that also brings to a close the review of front headline stories on the Daily Times newspaper this Wednesday. Don't forget to log into the website of the Daily Times for more of those stories. We move ahead to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is this day newspaper. Incidentally, it's also our last paper for review this Wednesday. It says, ESS brokers truce as oil workers call off nationwide strike. Parties agree to allow unionization based on free will. Unions grant commercial activities in states. How Nopeng TUC insisted Dangote cannot form union for workers. Narrate how Dangote team worked out on minister twice. We move to the story just above the masthead of the leading story is also a leading story. Second leading story on this day is actually atop the leading main story. Edun Oyedele said no plan to implement 5% fuel surcharge in January. Explain commencement order must be issued gazetted. Presidential Task Committee Chair reveals only 60,000 kilometers of 200,000 kilometers of roads tarred. And the story continues on the cover. Above that, BWU unveils BNCH to transform cash management in Nigeria. And atop the masthead of this day, Natasha, citing pending appeal court case, NAS blocks senators at resumption despite suspension expiration. PDP condemns moves to stop her resumption. Tells senator to get ready to resume at NAS. That brings to a close our review of front headline stories on this day newspaper this Wednesday. For more, log into the website of this day newspaper, www.thisdaylive.com. It's on that note we also conclude today's Inside Nigerian Leadership Television. For more, don't forget to log into the website of Leadership for more of our stories. Don't also forget to join us on this station for news on the hour. My name is Winifred Weber. Thanks for joining us.
Be part of our brand. Leadership for God and country.